welcome to the Beginner's Handbook. I'm Jordan.
I'm Jamie.
And in this episode we are going to be talking about mystery in your tabletop RPGs.
Yeah.
So I think we'll just open straight up with a couple of questions. So first of all, if you're a GM, how have you done mysteries in your games? What's your secrets, tips or tricks that you've had to make a game mysterious or interesting for your players? For the second question, we'd like to throw it over to your players or even yourselves as GMs as well. Do you like mystery? Are you more about action? And what's your play style? Are you more an investigation guy? Or are you more an action guy? What's your jam?
Yeah. I mean, mystery in a game, I think in general will keep most people interested, but as we'll kind of talk a little bit further on, that sometimes if you kind of overdo it, it's probably one of the quickest ways to switch people off, and just I think you can lose a table quite quickly if you go too heavy down the mysterious route. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So things that we'll be talking about, using ambiguity. We'll be looking at reveals and backstories. We'll be looking at like a player's expectation and when it's time to either kind of throw them a curveball or sometimes to kind of play that down to then make the big reveal bigger and more exciting. Using hints as well, where they're going along, dream sequences, all sorts of different things we'll be looking at there. And then again we'll be looking at kind of things to avoid to kind of to stop yourself from killing the mystery.
Yeah, because there's a lot that I've been guilty of. I think one of the first games I ever ran for you guys, it was like the mystery. After about 7 hours of playing a game, it doesn't matter how much mystery you got, everybody's knackered, especially at 3:30 or 3 in the morning, I think, before the last hour. So yeah, I mean, things like we'll be looking at doing build up, no payoff, actually giving away things, not like accidentally giving it away. I had a blunder actually a couple of weeks ago in a game, and I totally was like, oh, so you mean this character X? And they're like, it was that character, we knew it was that. And I was like, oh god, what have I done? But so rather than like faux pas and fumbles, it's more about just telling people it for no reason, or even between games. But we'll get into that all later as well. So you know what, we'll leave the good one for last when we actually get to it. But that's basically all the topics we'll be covering today. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think for us as well, what for you, Jamie, then what about mystery? You've got mysteries, but you've also got puzzles. Do you have something about that that's is there something that separates the two for you?
Yeah, so I mean, to me the difference is a mystery is something that will get you thinking, but it doesn't necessarily need to be solved to make progress. It's something that can be explored, it's something that can be left, whereas a puzzle is something that needs to be solved to reveal an answer, whereas something that's a mystery, you might never come up with an answer to that. It might remain some mysterious event that doesn't get solved, but it floats and adds to a story or to background or whatever, whereas a puzzle is a challenge that either presents a block that you need to overcome or you need to work your way around it. That to me is the way I would kind of differentiate between the two of them in a game.
Yeah, I mean, and even though I think that's a really good break between the two and what they both are, but that doesn't obviously, and we've both had this in our games, either if we've ran it or played it, where just because they are kind of sort of separate technically, it doesn't mean you can't add the two together to make something mysterious. But both, once they figure out that what the mystery is all about, it gives them answers to progress story or whatever. So yeah, it's really cool, and it's a good way to go into it. So I think then, why don't we speak about building mysteries in games? Let's say from GM's perspective to start with, at least. So I think really the main thing for me then, I think the first one, and it's like the easiest plot tool, although you can go way too far with it, is ambiguity. Like a good example that I've came across with role-playing games, or if I'm running Call of Cthulhu, it's a good example. A big part of like Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green or any of these Lovecraftian based games even things like Cult Divinity Lost, which is quite cosmic almost in nature as well. A big part of these games is like the fear of the unknown, and it's, especially for horror and building tension, the unknown's a great way to build up suspense and kind of get their brains turning about games that you're running. So that's where ambiguity is actually, in terms of fear of the unknown, that's a great thing to support ambiguity. Certainly even just for the encounters that you might have in the game.
Because like when it comes to something that's like horror based or anything down that line, if you make some of the descriptions a bit ambiguous, then what it means is the person's imagination is going to take over. So rather than you going into the nth degree of detail and going, right, okay, it looks like this and then this happens and then you're describing something that either scares you or puts you on edge or whatever it is, if you can leave it ambiguous, then the player will fill in the gaps themselves and they'll make it something that scares them or whatever. So that can be hard to do. That will take practice, especially. Me personally, I think horror is probably the most difficult thing to do well.
It is for me, and part of it is for me is because I watch so much horror and I don't really get really scared by any of it because I've seen it so long. So when it comes to actually constructing something scary, I'm like, I still don't know what's scary because I don't get scared by a lot of things. So talking about ambiguity, there's a game that I've been playing that it's called Delta. The system's Delta Green, which for anyone listening or watching that doesn't know, it's basically like Call of Cthulhu in the modern day. It's more like the X-Files almost, than it is kind of the old-fashioned kind of dilettante type stuff that goes on in the 20s in the base Call of Cthulhu game. But there's a scenario called Impossible Landscapes, and I've seen about of that campaign. What I've personally seen is probably around, I'm trying to think, about 20 something hours or something of it. I still don't have a clue what the hell is going on in that game, but it is awesome. It's so good, it's so weird, it's kind of dreamscapey, and it's all very, sometimes that stuff can be too much, like it just gets a bit boring or it's just too weird and doesn't make a lot of sense, whereas this game doesn't make a lot of sense in good ways. So while it's not super scary, everything that's happening in it is so ambiguous. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell is going on? And like the bits that I'm like keeping track of, I can't put together because I don't know what the hell is happening. But that's really keeping my interest going, and I'm constantly trying to spin out what's happening. You know what I'm like with games, like jump into all these conspiracy theories. And usually when we're playing games, I'm sending you like, I think this is what's happening, and you'll send me what you think's happening. And it's like all these different theories, and most of the time we're not even close, but it's like that's part of the fun where we're trying to connect these threads and solve that mystery, or maybe even solve, it might be we're piecing together these parts of the puzzle to unlock maybe the next stage of the game. But usually it gets you going and gets your mind racing, especially. So for monsters it's good for the horror element, but in terms of story it really gets people thinking, at least as far as I've seen at my own tables or at others. It certainly gets your players going, like what is going on, and they become invested in actually trying to solve it, like the Scooby, the Mystery Gang and all that. Certainly in the last few games I've run, that was a big part of what I was doing, is throwing in all these mysteries. They're going, what the hell is going on? And then when they found out, it was just like, boom, look at that, and they had a great time.
Yeah, again, just I think that's the thing with it. Like, we'll touch on this in a little bit, but just with what you're saying there about not having a clue what's going on, the danger is that drifts into dangerous territory. But I think we'll hold fire on that just now, and we'll revisit that when we come to the kind of the kind of warning section, But another thing for mystery, that again, I don't know how much people use this in their games, and again, maybe that's something that everybody can let us know through the different social media channels, or if you're on YouTube watching this, then in the comments underneath, which is revealing elements of your character's backstory. So, I mean, with it from a GM's point of view, then fingers crossed you're working with a player at this point when you introduce this. Otherwise, the most stunned person at your table is going to be that player that suddenly discovers that they've got a wife and 4 kids in Hawaii or whatever, you know. Whereas if you're working with the player and you go, right, okay, your character is, you know, again, if we're sticking to the kind of Cthulhu element, well, okay, you've came up with your character and they're an investigator and they're from, you know, New York in the 20s. Well, what happens if they were in First World War and they suffer from flashbacks, but during these flashbacks what we'll do is we'll start to introduce some of the Cthulhu mythos, or, you know, whatever. So you're working with them, and then you end up in a kind of Sixth Sense, I see dead people kind of thing, right? But the rest of the players that are there don't realise that that's what's going on. So at first you seem completely coherent, and then gradually as the game is progressing you start to become, well, from their perception, their point of view, you start to become less coherent, you start to become less with it, and then eventually the players might then puzzle out that actually there's something different going on, and then on and on and on that story goes. That to me is something that can be really creative, because you've got, rather than it's just the DM's idea that they're introducing to kind of keep everybody engaged with the story, they're actually getting somebody that's involved with experience in the story. They're giving them a little bit of insight to it, but ultimately it then gives the GM, the DM another challenge, which is, although they're giving this person some kind of sneak peeks and a kind of quick look behind the scenes, that they then need to do something else to keep them on their toes, and then to keep the kind of the mystery element for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is something, it's interesting with the player backstory stuff, because it lets, like, I know a lot of GMs that will really want to get involved in that process. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's actually pretty cool. Although I'm somebody that tends, as a player, I tend to go, like, create a character as quick as I can. I don't put too much thought into it, and I usually like roll stats, or I random generate something. But if I'm rolling stats, I just roll it stats first in order, and then I go, what character's this, and I build something I think's generic enough that I can then go to a GM and say, how does this fit into the kind of environment you've got, whether it's a pre-gen one or if it's one they've made. I've had people that say, well, what would you like for this? And then they give you 30 questions. I'm kind of like, right, okay, that's enough. So just tell me what you think works and I'll do it.
Yeah.
But one thing I've actually seen from two sides, so I'd be interested for your point of view. So you've got a guy, and you've got like your back. Let's say your backstory is quite general, and I've got a guy, and I've decided I want him to be super ambiguous for the players. So what's nice about that is players at the table can actually work to try and figure out that backstory and things, you know, and their GM might help, like me, build all of that. But the players will try and figure it out, you know, or other players, sorry if I'm being the mysterious stranger. But one thing I've seen recently, and actually it worked quite well, although I guess it takes a certain amount of trust for the actual table. You know, the GM needs to be able to trust everybody, as well as the players need to trust each other with the things that they should and shouldn't know. Like, for example, if you play a lot of Call of Cthulhu and you know a lot of Lovecraft stuff, you probably know everything that's like, you know the lore enough to basically know, okay, that's this monster, or you know not to fight things all the time, you know. But most of the time when I'm playing games with folk, at least when I'm running them, these people either don't know that, or I trust them enough to not meta game the hell out of it, you know, and actually still play dumb. Oh, is that a monster? Oh no, you know, and actually kind of buy into it a bit.
Yeah.
But when it comes to player backstory, I've seen it happen where while people go off and make their own individually and then bring it together, and then each player's trying to figure out each other's character, I've also seen people make characters together at a session 0, and openly at the table they've discussed like with each other, and the GM's discussed it with the players openly, with others around, like what would be somebody's secrets, or what's their backstory, what's their twist and all that. And what's interesting, I've seen, sure, that might not be ambiguous for the players, but that almost sets up an agreement for the table for their characters to know how do we try and solve that for their characters, and it ends up becoming a thing where they can almost support each other's stories into the actual game. It's quite interesting, because certainly the last group I've seen that happen with, it went nuts. And now they all knew the guy's backstory, but they actually allowed chances for that guy to be implementing it or injecting it into the game, or kind of supporting it a bit, or maybe even teasing out that backstory a bit more by aggravating the character, to do certain things. So I mean, just because it's ambiguous, well, we spoke about ambiguity, but it's kind of the same thing for character backstory. Having it for the players, it's good because it lets you all figure that out together. But don't let that stop you actually discussing all that as players and just letting your characters work that out, because you'll have a lot of fun kind of building that story up yourselves, because you're almost adding to the backstory at that point. Big part of Call of Cthulhu with backstories is once you start getting your bouts of madness, you can just, as a GM, you will go in, you'll change parts of the backstory. So even the players' own backstories become ambiguous as they start to, well, they know you've added or made the change, but the characters don't know the difference now when you go insane and it now says that you hated your mother, but actually you were a mama's boy the whole time, but now it says you murdered her. You're like going, what's going on there? So, but anyway, that's something I find quite fun, especially what you're saying, building the stories. It's dead collaborative and it's always a lot of fun. And even as a group, building backstories for characters, it's a lot of fun as well. Everyone kind of gets a bit of the editor's tool out, although there is the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth. So just be careful when you've got 8 players, because it's going to take forever to get through 2 characters.
Yeah.
But so I think then that kind of leads us on to, we spoke about ambiguity, we spoke about characters having their own secret backstories, or secret for the players at the table, and the characters, or secret just for the characters and the players, all are kind of in the know. But there's also a thing, even with backstories, you can subvert people's expectations a bit.
Yep.
Subversion of expectations actually can really, really help add that twist to your game, especially if you're, and we'll come into hints in a minute, but if you're dropping hints at places, or if you're alluding to certain things and building mystery, and you're kind of focusing that mystery into an end point that isn't what the players expect, either the players or the characters, but probably best the players, that can always just, it's a total blast. It's amazing when you can turn around and look at everybody's face and they're like, what the hell is going on? It's so much fun.
Yeah, and again, kind of going back a little bit to earlier on, kind of done the see dead people thing. Well, that's, like, in terms of pop culture, that's one of the biggest kind of subversions of expectations. Everybody in The Sixth Sense, or at least most people, were going along going, well, of course he's a psychologist, and then the big reveal at the end, then it took most people by surprise. So and that's the thing, like, it can be as simple as in your game, create somebody that is a bit gruff, doesn't have a lot of time for people, likes wearing black, lives in a castle or a cave, put every single arrow pointing towards, this is the bad guy, this is the serial killer, this is, whatever. And then at the end of it, I revealed that he was the guy that was, was actually trying to save the day at the end of it. Create that element of, wait a minute, we were so sure this was the case, that the players feel a bit lost and that they're back to the start, and then they have to start puzzling it out again. And again, we'll kind of touch, I think, more on the pitfalls of that, because again, you can run into some kind of relatively obvious ones with that, but the main thing with it is that at the end of the kind of reveal of what's actually happening that it makes the players question rather than it makes them feel cheated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing about the subversions of expectations, like I've done a lot of these kind of cosmic horror type stuff, and when I started running Cult Divinity Lost, it's all about these hidden realms, or like you've got somewhere Inferno, it's like hell, I can't remember exactly, but it's all these worlds that are influenced by all these, it's like angels and demons, but it's just the angels are really bad and the demons are like really, really bad, you know. And so, but knowing that, it's like both the, like at least one of the other players had read all of that stuff, so I was kind of like, I don't want to do just a strictly like kind of lore based game. And it's the same with a lot of Cthulhu games I run now. I actually don't really use a lot of like default Lovecraftian lore. Sure, it might be hidden and boiling away in the background, but it's never usually front and centre. It might be just like a zombie story or something, you know. It doesn't need to be always that some shoggoth is coming in to suck off people's faces or anything like that. But with Cult, what I ended up doing was we'd played a few games of it, but we also played, rather than having all the extra lore stuff, we played a few kind of normal games where it was more around, we played like backstory building games. So it was more like, why is this policeman turned PI, you know, and how did he get his dark secrets? And for those who don't know Cult, well, for you who doesn't know Cult actually, so I've not managed to play it, as you've got advantages, you've got disadvantages, and you've got dark secrets, and that's what builds your character. They usually have mechanical benefits, and what I think dark secrets are just, they're like narrative bits and hooks that the GM can use and you can use. So some of the games we've done were backstories. So we used these characters before and then said, well, because we can't get everyone together, let's do wee one shots with each other, either individually or as a group, like to see how you got that backstory, and let's build it up. So we actually made games that were building those bits of backstory, but none of them were very cosmic, or you know, there wasn't monsters jumping about or anything like that. So one of the games that we were kind of tailing off some of that stuff, you know, they were dead set. The players were like, cool, we know it's some killer going about, it's gang warfare happening, and it's like, you know, well, it's kind of like gangsters versus mobsters, you know, I was kind of doing. So they were all fighting and they were solving all of the stuff. They did end up solving the mystery, but at the end the mystery turned out to be some cosmic, well, I'm saying cosmic, it was more cult related horrors, but it was basically the veil being lifted, and all of this stuff was a manifestation of this evil demon thing. So, but then they weren't expecting that. They were going, oh cool, because this was tailing off a kind of mini campaign of just real world issues, and then it was like ripped from under them, almost literally. It was the ground being torn open and showing the real stuff. And while Cult and things like Cthulhu, people were expecting mythos, because we'd run so many not mythos, with no intention of changing that, you know. I don't really think I bothered thinking about changing it until I think a couple of nights before the actual game night. And I said, let's throw that in, because they're going to sit and solve the mystery and kill the baddie and they'll feel great. But I was like, nah, I still want them to maybe almost die though. So boom, throw in some monsters. It was great fun, you know, and they didn't expect it.
Yeah. So did you, just picking up on what you said, did you deliberately run the games as being very real world, so that at some point, not necessarily specifically with that game, but at some point in the future, when you then used the mythos in the game, that it was a bigger surprise and it was putting more, I suppose, players on the back foot at that point, because they're not expecting it, and then they're in a point where they're then having to puzzle out what's going on, because all of a sudden their world is literally just changed. Yeah,
oh man, that's one of them. Our time almost ran out. There's a whole mechanic that you can, it doesn't matter. So the two things, I always wanted it to boil away. Like a lot of the games I do, I might, just because it's good for inspiration for me, I'll maybe go look at some weird story online, or use like Lovecraft background, or I'll check out the cult lore and use some of that. My intention for it was to keep it normal, and then at the end they would find some kind of occultish tome or a cultish thing, either it be an altar or something that basically says there's something really weird going on actually, that's maybe been the cause of all the symptoms I've seen. So rather than it being an overt there's monsters kicking about, I was going to use it as just a wee way to finish tying off that kind of 4-part game, and just if they wanted to do something more supernatural, then okay, we've now got the start of that. But so the intention was I would still surprise them at the end, but as we get closer to the game I thought this would make it so flaming cool if there was monsters. So they did see some of that,
yeah.
But then that's when I started adding doors closing behind them and things, and like they were starting to hear all this stuff happen, and the impact was actually a lot better rather than it feeling totally left wing, because one of their characters was somewhat into a cult, and I think their backstory, if I remember right, I think one of their dark secrets was to do with some ritual, or they were victim of a crime and the crime was something occultish. So they were kind of always guessing that, but for them it was funny. It was almost the opposite of subverting their expectation, because it was like the whole way along the game they were constantly being proved wrong, and then right at the end they were actually proved right, and they were like, vindication, yes. And then they finally got to brag and use some of their skills that they never got to use for the 4 games they played. But I saw the intention was to surprise them, and it was really just to dangle a cliffhanger at the end, just to get them, if they wanted to do something supernatural, we've got a very clear and easy one to kick off from. But then I threw in some supernatural at the end, and it was just a bigger surprise. It was more like a sucker punch, I think, because they were about to go out, and then it was like bam, back of the head. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And it was wild. I think no one died, sadly, but you know that tends to happen in my games. I do my best and nobody dies, mostly because of my crap rolls though. Even as a GM I'm cursed with low rolls.
No, weak wrist action.
That's exactly
what it's down to.
That's exactly what it is, and it's such a pain. This is why I like Cthulhu though. It's like you do want your 1s and your 2s, whereas in D&D and practically every other game I've played, that's not good.
Yeah. Tailor the system to suit you, not the other way around.
Have you had any, I'm trying to think, have you had any times where you've been playing a game and like let's say you've had an idea what's going on, and it's just like, bosh, it's totally twisted, it's totally different, and it was actually a positive experience. Maybe we'll talk about how it could maybe be negative if it's too weird and too silly, but have you had something that was actually like, whoa, that was a nice pleasant surprise, or an unpleasant surprise but still good? It's hard because it's probably, we've not had something dramatic, I think, in our core group like that for a while, because most of our games have been fantasy, so it's been a bit less like that.
Yeah, and at what point does it become dramatic when, you know, every week, you know, you're doing something heroic, or, you know, a griffin's flying down and, I don't know, kills the leader of your camp in one swoop and all this sort of stuff. Not that I'm referencing anything there. But I can't really think of anything specific that's happened, but I do know that we've had games where we've went in thinking, you know, we've went down one line of inquiry, and normally where it's worse is when like 2 of us think the same thing, so that when we then both start talking about it, then the other player that's there, if they're kind of 50-50 on the idea, because they hear the 2 of us talking about it, for example, they go, well, it must be that, because I was kind of thinking that too. So we kind of steamroll down this one track, and then it turns out that it's not the case, just because we took the first clue that was there and kind of ran with it rather than stopping and analysing the broader picture as we were going on, and as we were getting more information, because you go, no, it still works, it must be that.
Just ignore that new evidence, who cares?
I know, it's fine, just ignore it. But I can't think of anything, again, like you're saying, particularly dramatic or like properly kind of shock horror. I think in general, the games that you and I are in, you do get that here and there, but it's always kind of done within moderation. I don't think it's ever done so that it's a huge dramatic reveal, and I don't think it's ever done to the point that, you know, it's so small but it happens all the time. I think it's just enough that it's naturally part of the story, rather than it it jumps out, because the danger is as well, like with any of these techniques, if you like, with any of them, that at the end of the game the players talk about, oh, see, because that was kept vague or ambiguous, then blah 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 blah, aye, because it was ambiguous, blah 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 blah, rather than they talk about what actually happened with the story, or with like a backstory reveal or anything like that. They'd go, when you revealed that as part of your story, and you know, blah blah blah, when you revealed it as part of the story, and they keep talking about the event rather than the kind of like the context behind it, the story behind it, and all that sort of thing. So that, I think, is the danger that you can run into, and because it's done kind of just enough in our sort of main campaign that we play, I can think more about how the story's progressed over time and things like that, rather than specifically, you know, the kind of, you know, the dramatic change or anything like that.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that there's not really, you've not had an experience that's, because there's a difference between just like having a good game and like having a hook at the end that just gets you right in the back and just pulls you back into the game. Because a lot of the stuff we've done, it's kind of mid-campaign as well, just looking back at it. So I mean, that doesn't mean you can't have stuff like that. Like, there's plenty of ways for that to happen. One example I'm thinking of is the Pulp Cthulhu game we done. Oh no, but you weren't in that first game. But there was a game in it, but you did join it. It was the one where we were playing TV repairmen, and we went to a town. And for me, while it wasn't a plot point, and I just liked it as a GM, so we were doing just a purist Cthulhu game. It wasn't Pulp. We got to a certain point through it, and then we kind of slipped into the Dreamlands. But when we'd done that, we actually get handed the Pulp Cthulhu rules, and I was like, oh, that's because that's not what I was expecting. And I just liked that from a mechanical point of view, because it kept it fresh. But that's a bit more of an unusual encounter, because I don't think there was a lot of story surprises. Although you insta-killing me was a surprise, not because you killed me, but just because you insta-killed me. I forgot how much how surprising. It's like, it took a wrench back at when I did have to kill you though. It wasn't my fault. It was the GM possessing me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was also surprised that I took you out in one blow as well. I was like, oh.
It makes you remember, just because it wasn't Pulp anymore. At that point, we were in the purest Cthulhu world, when you've got like 4 hit points and that's it. But even in terms of subverting expectations, just to give you an example from one of my other games I've been running, there's a core group of guys I play with a lot, who we've been playing D&D for a long time. If you've listened to the podcast before, you've definitely heard about these guys playing D&D for about a year and a half. But anyway, I'd wanted to try something different with them, because one of the guys wants to do a Star Trek campaign but doesn't want to read the Star Trek rules. He doesn't want to spend a lot of work, and that's fine, you know, because there's plenty of systems out there that you can tweak. Stars Without Number is a good example. But I suggested the Alien game rules, because he wanted it to be boots on the ground. It was going to be hardcore, maybe a bit more scary, maybe have horror elements. And the Alien game is just, oh god, it's so much fun. It's so good. But I said, well, to learn them, instead of going away and me giving you a PDF and you need to go learn it yourself, I'll run a series of games. We've still got one to go actually, but I'll run one of the games called Chariot of the Gods. It's, I think, the first cinematic encounter that they have, which you'll be playing shortly. So I won't spoil anything. But one thing that did happen in it was to subvert their expectations, not to subvert them intentionally, but the system itself done that, because they're used to D&D. If you get hit and go down, it's like, who cares? I need to fail at least. I need to get 2 wins at least to die or be stomped on before I can die. But otherwise, if I get up, my death saves are back to 0. It's just nice and easy. No one's ever going to die. This guy locked himself in a room with a monster, and it just turned round, and poor guy, I felt terrible, because I was like, oh man, they're loving this. And this was the first time he was playing a bold character. He's usually the rational, reasonable character, and this time he was like, do you know what, I don't care, kicking in the door, lock it. And then turns round, there's a monster in front of him, and it just turned round and it killed him in one shot, and he was like, what? And I'm like, he's like, where's my death saves? I'm like, you don't get death saves in this. So I turned around the thing and showed him the chart that shows the injuries you get, and all this caption says, for those that play Alien, you'll know what injury it is. It just says your story ends here on the back. So it was like that. But the thing is, while that wasn't an intentional plot twist or anything I threw in, it's an example of subverting expectations. That now, sure, you might think, oh, did they go away upset or anything? No, he actually went, oh my god, because that's the first time they felt threat at that level, because I'm not protected by 3 levels of death saves or failed death saves. Everyone else at the table instantly went, what is going on? And then they see them die behind the door and all that, and they're just going, we've got to get out. And that was the first time that they had that sort of tension in the group. I started throwing stress dice at them and all that, and they had this dice pool and they can't hold all their dice because they've got so much, and most of it's stress, and they're chucking dice like that. It was total bananas, man. It was great. But it's an example of how, for them, they're used to and comfortable with potentially life-threatening situations. Because in D&D, it's like, God, no one dies in D&D. Like, not often, or not easily. And I suppose you can do it easily, but if you do it, you're just throwing a big monster at somebody and killing them, and it's no fun. There's no challenge for you. But for them, that was the first time they were taken out of their comfort zone. They had their expectation of what a potentially lethal situation would be like, and the alien system just twisted that the other way, and it had them all scattered. It was crazy. That was the end of the first game, I think, and it was wild. Aye, such a good ending.
Yeah. I was just thinking the way that death was described. Your story now ends. Yep.
It's such a good. It's one of, it's like critical injury. I can't remember which one it is, but it's like, yeah, and that's not even one of the worst ones, So it's just so good. But I think then that kind of leads us on to hints and like breadcrumbs. They're good ways to start to. I mean, everybody knows, you've seen Tom and Jerry. Or for anyone that doesn't actually get that reference, you've seen stuff in shows where it's like people have like a mouse trap and they put treats all the way up to it, until the thing goes into the trap and it falls on them. It's breadcrumbs are great because they lead the players. Like hints can, the way I see the two, hints can be things like you suggest to players, whether it be through you're just telling the players because they're just not getting the point, just because it might be a hard puzzle they're solving or a hard mystery they're trying to unravel. So, but you might give that in person or via things within the game. But breadcrumbs are more like, it's sort of like giving them hints, but you're leading them down a path that they basically follow. And that's a great way to actually, if you mix that in with, if you do that really well, you can actually use that to eventually subvert their expectations at the end, like we've spoke about. And breadcrumbs can be ambiguous as well, because that gets people scratching their heads and thinking of all these crazy theories. But that's kind of how I define the both of them. I don't know if you've got any different definition or if you've got examples that you can provide.
I mean, pretty much with what you're saying. A kind of really simple way of thinking about it for me is a hint is a one-off clue, which will appear, for whatever situation to do whatever thing. If you've got players going away from the kind of main story arc, so you drop a hint to get them back onto it. So a hint can be kind of reactive to what's going on, whereas the breadcrumbs, again, is lots of smaller hints, but to take the players down a particular route, a particular path. And that's kind of the way that I would kind of think about them. Breadcrumbs, there's lots of, tend to be a bit smaller because you want them moving in a particular direction. A hint is when somebody is careering away from where they should be, and you're trying everything you can to get them back to doing what they should be doing without having to go, right guys, stop a minute, you're going in the wrong direction, you need to move. You're trying to keep it in character, or you're trying to keep it in game, or whatever other way you do it, but you're just giving them just enough that they're making the decision themselves and it's still on their own terms.
Yeah, I mean, an example of like breadcrumbs, I won't go too far into it, so if it's too vague, tell me to, like, hone in on it. And I'm trying to not say too much because you might play it at some point. But there's a game called Morkborg that I've been playing, and I've only really ran it a few times now, but I've ran the game that's inside the core rulebook, which is a tiny rulebook, but the game's so flaming good. But anyway, so there's lots of things like you can get hints from a seer at the start of the game, you can get hints from another character who I won't mention in case you come across him. But basically what's happened in this game, in this scenario, is the king's son has been abducted and you need to go and get him. And in return you don't get executed. That's basically the premise for the game. So you go off to this den and you go in, and as soon as you go in it's like, oh man, this is real bad. Whatever it is, it's real bad. So, but there's constant kind of things that lead you to where you can find the boy. There's all these bits that lead you all the way there. And it's great because you don't need to go directly follow those paths. Or there's like abstract ways you can kind of circle around to the same thing. But ultimately it gets you down to that bit and you kind of find what you're looking for. And depending on what route you take or who you speak to in what order, you can actually hear different stories or different things that suggest different reasons to why the boy was nicked, and then you're kind of like, wait, so the person that's done this, has he actually done it, or is he actually a bad guy, or were you lied to, or is that person lying to you to throw you off? And it's a lot of fun because you end up with people, you know, they're sitting speaking to who they think might be the big bad guy, and they're sitting arguing with each other as players. So I usually make that happen, like I'm saying that's in character, so it's the big guy standing there like this, cross-armed and waiting while their characters argue about should we kill this guy or not. But it gets total wild. But breadcrumbs are a great way that the game uses it. It's not a big game, but because of that, it's they've got a very succinct way to kind of lead you through effectively a dungeon crawl. And now the main path that you can go is probably the quickest, maybe not the easiest, but it's the clearest for players. Yeah. But if you go off the path, they've got a kind of secondary layer or kind of a couple other layers of breadcrumbs they use to lead you down a different narrative story as well as taking you to your end point. You start to get different perspectives and things like that, and it gets people going like, what? It builds the mystery really well about what is actually going on in this den in the first place. And depending on what path you go, you might be surprised at what happens near the end, you know. It's a very effective way of doing it, and it's well written in that game in particular. But
yeah. Well, one of the kind of like the use of breadcrumbs in one of our campaigns. So this was in our longer term campaign that we've been playing. Again, if you've listened to previous episodes, you'll have heard us talking about it, where we are a group of dwarves who have been kicked out of our home, and now we're making our way back there again to get it back. Nice and simple was the kind of overall plot, and then we're working our way through. So it's been going on for 2 years now, so it's been going on for quite a bit. And something that happened to us, I can't really remember how early this was in the campaign, but a good while back, we came across a talking, keeps changing whether he's a turtle or a tortoise, but he's a turtle or a tortoise. I think he's supposed to be a tortoise, but we keep saying turtle.
Yeah.
I think is what's happened. Yeah. But we could split a difference and say
is the tortoise got the feet or the fins? I think it's a turtle. Yeah, I think it's that one there. Yeah. We call it turtle. It's easier to say after the 10,000th time that you end up saying that.
Yeah, so the talking turtle tortoise hybrid that we've got, it originally appeared and we went, oh, okay, that's a bit different, that's a bit strange. Yeah, why not? Why not having talking turtle tortoise? Why not? So he then came with us and we're looking after him and things, and he's a bit kind of dim. I think that was the best way of describing him at the start. He's a bit dim, and you know, he's got delusions of grandeur, and he's referring to Jordan's character as his champion and telling everybody that he's a god and stuff. And we're going, alright, okay, fair enough.
And he was right, Jamie. He was right.
Breadcrumbs, we need to ease them into it. Remember, come. So that is eventually what happened. As the game progressed, it started to go, well, rather than he's appeared out of nowhere and we've been looking after him and you know, just kind of going about our business and just letting them tag along, that actually the more and more that happened, like there was different coincidences that started happening. At one point we get ambushed, and when we were fighting to protect ourselves and whoever else was there, like a lightning bolt came and struck one of the people like outright dead that was attacking us, and the little turtle tortoise went, you know, that was me showing my power. And we're like, well, it's a bit weird that somebody does get struck with lightning when there wasn't any storm clouds in the sky, but
yeah.
And it is a bit weird that a turtle tortoise is talking, and so, you know, different little things started happening that let us go, okay, maybe he is right, maybe this is what's going on. Fast forward that a little bit more when we decided that there was something different about him, that different events happened which kind of sped up this process of kind of revealing more and more elements about him, to the point that eventually he starts kind of taking over and his power starts to grow a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and we are led down this path of, actually, do you know what, he's not a good god to have on board, he's actually the complete and total opposite. He is a nutcase, and we need to get rid of him somehow. So that whole kind of trajectory that still hasn't been resolved as of as of recording this just now, is, again, has been going on for 2 years ish, and the clues have been dropped in every so often, and it's been a big long path that it's taken us down. And again, I think later on we'll maybe kind of come back to this, but that's been the biggest example of the breadcrumbs for me in any game, because, you know, partly because it's been going on like in real world time for so long, and as well as that because, you know, the initial breadcrumbs that you were getting tossed, it wasn't even obvious that there were breadcrumbs and that there was anything going on. To us it was just, this is a new character that is, you know, joined our kind of ragtag band of folk travelling along, and we'll build them a little wee pen when we get back to our homeland, and they can live in there and roam free and, you know, all this sort of stuff. And then it turned out that he was actually conspiring against us the whole time.
Yeah, well, I think that really, now this is where I suppose the expectations were subverted a bit, and that was, now his background was ambiguous, so that was a tick, and then the subversions, that our expectations were changed when I think I tried to pull a ring. I had a finger, I pulled some guy's ring off, and I actually pulled his finger off or something, and I shoved it in the bag before the autopsy guy seen it. And then we looked in and the turtle was eating the finger, and then that's when he turned into a real baddie. Like, he might have been brewing in the background, but once he eaten a finger, he was just a pest from there on out, and he actually just became a baggage pretty much from that point onwards. I mean, it was really great arc for a long time. I was surprised I could be bothered with it for the most part, but it does get to the point where it just got a bit samey, but we'll cover why that is. That's
just because he was flattering you the whole time, calling you his champion and kind of going, oh, you're the strongest person here, you're worthy.
I think your guy was actually technically stronger. I just had a lot of advantage on it as well.
He was, but that's what I'm saying, he was massaging your ego there.
That's cool, it's alright. It sometimes feels good to get sweet nothings whispered in the ear, until you get a finger, and it was like, I want to put this thing out the window. But we'll explain, I said it got a bit dull, but we'll explain maybe why that happened later on. That kind of leads us on, because actually in that same game there was actually some of these going on, and I used some of these, the thing what I'm about to speak about, I used these more recently in some of my games. Never really personally done them, mostly because I'm not that bothered, but actually I find them a great technique for building mystery, and that's dream sequences.
Yep.
So have you could you provide an example? Do you remember any that you've had in that? Like, let's say it's that game, because I've had a lot in that game. I had one amazing dream sequence which we'll talk about, and I enjoyed it. But have you had any that maybe jumps out? That was a great sequence that built more mystery, or added to it, or helps you solve some of the mystery in the game?
Yeah. So again, in our long campaign, like for me, it seems to be kind of almost not quite every other game. You know, it's doing the DM a major disservice. But for me, especially with my original character, who never made it due to treachery. But, you know, again, if you've seen previous episodes, you know what happened there.
And you'll know it wasn't treachery.
Yeah, well, technically it wasn't. Because technically it wasn't your technically it wasn't your character. But it was still you. Still you that dealt the final blow.
I enjoyed every minute
2
of it.
years worth of work down the drain.
Yeah, that's when you deleted the Excel sheet we had.
I know.
Out of spite, delete.
Yeah. I didn't actually.
It didn't actually.
The sheet still exists. The sheet still exists.
Much less maintained now, though. Out of sadness.
Out of spite.
Yeah.
You can do the work. No, but in our long campaign, dream sequences for my original character came up quite a lot, especially kind of.
Was it quite frequent? I don't remember it being. For me, I don't remember my guy getting a lot of ones.
Overall, I would say, like, if just I guess I maybe had double the amount of dream sequences everybody did.
Right.
And there was a period kind of not at the start and not towards the end when my character never made it, kind of in the middle where they happened a lot.
Yeah.
And one of these dream sequences, again, they're all dwarves, so my character ends up in a ballroom and there's lots of people all dancing about and things, and there's a woman that's talking to him, that's kind of guiding him through, and she's trying to warn him about a danger, and he's trying to find out, number one, who she is, you know, why he's in a ballroom, what's going on in general. So I'm trying to get as much information as I can, because in the back of my head I'm going, right, this is a dream, and at some point you wake up. So conveniently, dwarves, mine the information as much as I can, get as much out. So as the sequence is going on, I asked the DM, like, who are all the people dancing, what's going on here, do the rolls, do the checks, and then discovered that it's actually different dwarven gods that are all dancing about. And then that's fine, and then all of a sudden somebody bursts through a door and it's like a man, but he's got, I can't remember if it's a deer's head or a helmet with antlers on it, and he basically crashes the party. But as soon as he does that, each of the gods start kind of vanishing and evaporating, and then eventually the woman that the character's with, she evaporates, disappears, and then wakes up and it's over. That to me was the kind of the biggest dream sequence that happened, because I think it was the first one, or if not, it was one of the first ones.
It's a big one that I remember, so maybe it was a big dramatic first dream.
But again, that's the thing, so whether it was the first one in the campaign or whatever, but it was one of the biggest, because this mysterious figure appeared who he didn't recognise, and even when he woke up the next day and went to like priests and things and went, here's what I've seen, here's what I've seen, here's what I've seen, have you got any answers? It was a no, it was a leave it with me, you know, all that sort of a thing. So then it was to be investigated further into the campaign, but there was so much that was going on, and that's me kind of really condensed it down. You know, there was different things, and there was the specifics of the warnings, and then seeing that, and then the woman saying, no, you know, not get long, you know, blah, blah, everybody starts disappearing. So there was a lot going on, and there was a lot to take in. And then on top of that, there was also the lore of, right, okay, well, there's like 20 plus gods here that you now know exist, that you then have to kind of do background filling in to figure out who they are and, you know, why they disappeared and all this, all the extra stuff with it. So that was the sort of big one for me. And then from that point forward, like any time that we were turning up to a new place, one of the things that my character would be doing would be, you know, try to figure out if there was anybody who was there who could potentially answer that religious question, and, you know, all these other different things. So it gave my character a sort of side shoot along with the main story that was kind of his personal burden, if you like, to try and figure out what's going on, and as well as try to figure out what was going on with that dream, that one event, also the kind of why me rather than, you know, somebody else, because he wasn't a particularly religious character or anything. So this kind of prophetic dream and warning, you know, why was it him, and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's the kind of main one that sort of jumps out for me. Is there anything with you, or maybe a different campaign?
I think firstly, what for me, why dreams can be really good is it can be a good, in terms of building mystery, as they can be a good kind of way to either drop hints like what you're talking about, or maybe lead people with breadcrumbs that maybe link to the waking world thing that they're doing. But it can also be ways to build up mystery of impending doom, you know, like an impending enemy, I should say, that maybe they're about to encounter some evil big magic person and they don't know that they're going to experience that yet. So it might feel a bit defunct in the moment, but as they start to see the dream almost manifest, it just builds suspense and it starts to solve that mystery and let everything fall into place. And I think what you've kind of gave an example of there is a good example of that. But for me, probably the dream sequence, I'm trying to think of a dream sequence that actually helped build mystery, because the one that I had in the campaign was we'd seen like previous people in the past, like there was some old kind of boss man that we used to have, and then there was some side character, but that was really just a fight. There wasn't any build up of mystery or I mean maybe potentially breadcrumbs, but nothing my guy would have been bothered investigating. But I think maybe one that I've used, trying to think, so I'd done one not recently actually, it was a while ago now, where the guys have been following this big evil cult type thing for a long time in a D&D game, and I'd never used a dream sequence at this point. So but anyway, we got to a point where they were going home, they were approaching the finale of the second act, and as they were kind of going, I was like, let them rest and I'll give them a dream sequence, because they were thinking about doing 5 or 6 different things, and they had this intended anyway. But the dream was effectively about this cult and kind of the cult coming out of the darkness, like in the dream, like literally doing it and surrounding the players and just killing them all and things. And they were like, oh, it's fine, we're in the dream, it can't hurt us. And then the first big hit them, and it was like 20 hit points. They went, what? Now, wouldn't have killed them, but they didn't know that. So that was fun. Ambiguity there, about some suspense. But anyway, so that really, what it done was a couple of things. It gave them a hint and a bit of breadcrumbs to let them know that there was an impending threat coming. They knew that what they thought might have been solved like 20 games before hadn't. There were still elements of them there, and they actually seen one of the characters that survived as well. So it kind of basically led them onto basically the main path and let them go with a bit of vigour to explore that kind of part of the story. Now what some of them missed, one of them thought it and then thought, oh nah, nobody else thinks it's not the case, but it alluded to this big finale where people, basically the baddies came and started slaughtering everybody in a town during this big festival, which was actually alluded to in the dream quite a bit, and it was that, like, initially the surroundings were at the festival, and then it was the darkness fell and these guys came in and killed all the players, so there was a lot of kind of what's the word, like, kind of basically the same sort of it was a metaphor for basically what was coming. And it basically they were like, oh crap, it built a lot of mystery, like what the hell's going on, who's still alive, what's going to happen next, is it going to happen soon? It turns out it was actually the same, it was the next game that all happened, and they went, it all came true. And as soon as the baddies started appearing, they knew straight away. They seen these guys in red robes and went, oh crap, that was in the dream. And it was awesome. It just, for them, it was the only time I've seen them really panicked in D&D, and the only other time I've seen them more panicked than that was in Alien, when one of their heads got popped open. And it was awesome. So good. The panic's so cool. But anyway, that's kind of our experience of dream sequences. But ultimately what they're great for, as long as you don't go too abstract and think you're some David Lynch type, you'll probably be able to incorporate maybe parts of the story, even answers to some of the things that players have questions for, but embed it in a way that they have to think about it a bit. Just let it sit. There's no, and if they don't get it, there's no harm in doing another dream later down the line that maybe makes it more clear. But it certainly is a great way to impart answers to people in a way that helps them figure out mystery that's in front of them, or maybe it'll give them the answer to a puzzle. Like in Lord of the Rings, you've got the speak friend and you can answer, you know, if your players were in a similar situation, you could have the answer given to them in a dream sequence, you know, and that would open that puzzle door. It's a great way for you to inject different things without needing to derail story or anything like that, which is why that actually turns out they're quite good. And the GM that we have for the games that we play, he tends to be quite good at them as well. So
and just exactly like you're saying, kind of tie in like a hint together with a dream sequence. Like you're saying, you can have whatever the situation is that happens in the dream, but you can directly give them an answer that they're struggling with. So rather than try to hint to give them enough information for them to figure it out themselves, that you directly give them it, but you're keeping it in game, you're keeping it within character. So again, the dream sequences are good for that as well. Just exactly like you're saying.
So that kind of leads us on. I mean, this isn't really, I suppose, a big point, but one thing that mysteries are good for is, or at least if you've got a dramatic moment in a game, one thing I tend to try and do now is tie off the ends of my games with something it doesn't need to be some big dramatic plot twist, but just I like to do something where I can summarise what's happening and then just give basically a lead into the next game, and really having a good ending or something that you summarise, like the last game that the guys played. It was in 8. No, I shouldn't say that because you're going to play it. The last thing that the guys played in another campaign I'm running, Curse of Strahd, where they were leaving a game. So basically they were doing this big fight with Baba Lysaga, for anyone that's played Curse of Strahd, and the game ended where they were getting these dream sequences as they started basically interfering in her territory. They were getting these dream sequences about her, just very vague ones. But as they got closer, one of the games ended where we actually spoke. Like they'd kind of described what they were doing. They'd rested. They'd got into the location that she's in, which is the ruins of Berez, and they found somebody that told her, "Oh, there's an evil person here." It was something to do with the Order of the Feather or something, for those who know the game. And yes, we actually ended the game like cool, and like really we were like, okay, that's a good place to stop. So I ended it with just describing how they heard someone humming and singing, and they heard goat bleating and things. Like, what the hell is that? And I just took it into almost like a movie shot bit or a narrative moment, and explained it when they turned round to see this woman pulling out a wee goat and taking it into the hut. And they went, "Oh my god, that must be the witch," and then we ended it there, you know. But for them, what ended up happening was I did a wee bit more drama into it, but then they're like, "Wait, why is she not like bad like that other person saying, like, why has she got a goat in there? Why is she out in the middle of what looks like a battle struck area?" And they had all these questions that they left the game with. So I left on a high note, but ultimately that high note gave them a whole bunch of other questions Also, the fact that they weren't sure if they were seen or not was great, because they're sitting going, "Were we seen?" Because their stealth checks were absolute crap. They didn't need to do stealth checks. I just made them do it anyway because I thought it would be fun. Because I knew one of them was rolling just. Nobody was rolling rocks that game at all, so I knew they weren't going to pass it. But having a good ending is a nice way. Like if you can build in just a wee seed for a little mystery, even if it's not a big mystery, if it's just a question that you leave players with, that's a great way to just have them make up their own puzzles in their head and their own mysteries. I don't really have anything else to add to that, so I think unless
just kind of echoing what you're saying, like if you can get the players leaving with questions, depending on what type of questions they are, that's probably a good thing. If you get them leaving asking you and going, oh, what about this, what about that, and it's questions which are in preparation for the next time that they're going to be there, then that's a good sign that you've got a decent ending, because if you're playing weekly or however often it is, it then means that that they're going to be thinking about that until you get everybody back to start playing, and it's going to do two things. Number one, it's keeping their interest, but also what it means is that when you sit down and go to start again, rather than starting to play the game and you have to do a 20-minute recap to get everybody kind of back into the mindset and to remind them of different things that have happened, they're doing that themselves because they're really engaged. So a good ending, you'll probably see that you'll have people asking you questions, and then another thing, that if you've got a good ending, that you have people disappointed that it's ended, that they don't realise the times went by so quick, or whatever it is. But again, that you've got them hooked and that they're wanting to find out more, and that they want to be back at the table for the next game, rather than alright, okay, you see them looking at their watch throughout it, and they're like, alright, okay, same time next week, brilliant, you've got engagement at that point. And ultimately, like anything that we've talked about up until now and how you can use it, that's what you're doing it to get engagement.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that both Nat Strad game and then the other guys I've spoke about loads of times, normally both those games, they always say Jordan loves to end it at these good bits, and it's so damn annoying, and I'm just going, yes. Because that's good, because obviously, I mean, usually it ends up, well, let's do a bit more, especially with the guys that drink a lot. Well, let's do a bit more, and then I do one more bit, but before I even get through 5 minutes of talking, somebody's fell asleep. So it's like, okay, cool, I can just wrap it up then. It's not like he's missing anything. But certainly, it's nice, it's good, it feels good as a GM when that happens, but ultimately, it feels better for the players who desperately want to keep playing, because otherwise, if you don't need to have good endings every game or anything. You don't need everybody to be kind of watering at the mouth. But actually sowing a wee bit of mystery or a wee answer to a mystery, just a small one or a hint, can be a good way to kind of just elevate an ending, if not make it better. But that kind of leads us on to the last few things we have covered. I think we've already spoke about most of this, so we maybe won't go on as much for some of them, but we'll be linking back to so we maybe won't be talking about new things here, but maybe linking back to things we've spoke about. And that's basically what can actually ruin a mystery. So my number one thing I hate, because it happens all the time, and it's not because I'm desperate to hear the answer. I think, oh, that's so cool. It's when you have a mystery and there's like no payoff at all. There's nothing. It just either flatly never gets answered. You get told it's not important, or the answer was like so not worth investigating in the first place. It just makes you just go, I've just spent 7 weeks working that out. So have you got any examples of something like that?
Yeah, so going back to the big dream sequence in our long-term campaign. So that happened, and then I was trying to get answers. So who was the woman? who's the mysterious figure that crashed the party, and that sort of thing. So I'm trying to find out as much as I can. So that's in the actual game that it happened, and I think all I got at that point was the woman's name and the fact that everybody that was dancing in the ballroom was a dwarven god, and you don't know who the person is that crashed the party. Next game, kind of try to do some more digging, don't get anything back. Next game, same thing, and I go, right, okay, well, me as a player, at that point I went, right, okay, this is important because it's obvious it's important because it took up a decent section of the game, and all this happened. It has to be important. So what we'll do is I'll sit on it and I'll revisit this in 2-3 games time or whatever, or I'll wait and I'll try pick up the cue from the DM that there's now something happening that's worth investigating. So anyway, so a bit of time goes by, and I get whatever hint, and I go, alright, okay, and start investigating it some more, and I then find out that the mysterious person who crashed the party was in fact our turtle tortoise pal, who's
in human form,
yeah,
by the way, whatever form he actually had, but
yeah,
not in tortoise form.
But at that point we didn't know that was the case. We were thinking he exists as a talking tortoise, and that he's got amnesia or something. But then we go, wait, so that's him in a kind of humanoid form, so is that what he's actually supposed to be like, and something's happened and he's been trapped inside this tortoise, and is that why he's a bit dopey? And so it starts a new level of kind of analysis. So we all start going through that, but at this point I still don't know anything about the woman in the dream other than her name and that she was given the warning, and I'm kind of having to draw my own conclusions as to why all the gods have disappeared when he came in, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm putting 2 and 2 together that Mr. Tortoise is bad, but that's as much as I can draw from that, and that Mr. Tortoise as a humanoid is more bad than Mr. Tortoise. So that's that's as much as I managed to draw from that. Anyway, a little bit of time goes by again. I kind of try bring it up. We end up visiting a town that's got almost nothing in it apart from a cathedral, and then we're in, and then we see. In fact, no, that was after. That was after. I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, so I kind of try and make inquiries about it as I'm going along, and I don't get anything back. So again, this is getting to the 2-year point or whatever, or a year and a half by the time that this was introduced. But the long and the short is a lot of time is going past, out with the game, and I still haven't got any answers here, and it's starting to get to the point that I'm going, will I actually get any answers here? So then my character died. I think, again, I might be mixed up. He might have been alive at this point. He might not have been. I don't think he was. I think he died. Then we end up in this town that, again, has got nothing in it apart from this cathedral, essentially. So we go in and then we look, and then on the wall there's masks, but it's of the dwarven gods.
That's right, yeah.
And then up and above, in its own spot, there's a new mask that's appeared that nobody recognises, and through a bit of digging we discover it's our tortoise pal. But this was after the character that had the dream sequence had died, but that was the kind of first time that was potentially revisited over a period of a year and a half, 2 years, and that's basically as much information as we got, that the person that was there went, that's funny, that mask wasn't there yesterday. and that was basically as far as we got. So, regardless of my original character being there or not, we're at a year and a half, 2 years or whatever we are, and we're no further forward to finding out more details about this woman and who she is and how she fits in the picture, and the kind of the true plot that's going on in the background. So for me, it's he started off with something that was mysterious and interesting, and that it was unique at this point in the game, and it filled you with intrigue and excitement, and you wanted to know more and what was going on, and then it just felt like it hit a wall and never get started again. So for me, that it eventually got to the point that I went, I don't think I'm even going to bother asking about this anymore, because it's either been forgot about, or there was a plan to do something with it and then the plan has changed. But rather than out a game going, by the way, I was thinking about doing something but I've changed my mind on it, so your character might still be puzzled with it, but I'm just telling you just now, there's no point in you thinking about it and you wasting your time. Just sit back and enjoy the rest of the game. There was no, there wasn't anything like that going on. So there's this mystery which is still overhanging the campaign, but for me it just feels like we're getting absolutely nowhere with it. So it's like a Groundhog Day. You're just repeating the same thing over and over again. It's just perpetually hanging about.
Yeah, I would say kind of on that as well, that there's nothing wrong with if players don't explore hints, which is very possible in some of these cases. There's nothing, if players don't explore hints and don't get stuff, that's okay too. The only thing I would caution towards that when it comes to mystery with no payoff, like what you're talking about, is when, I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. Basically, just bear in mind, if you're going to put something really hard in there, especially something that's might be integral to what's going on, I think the best way, if you want it to be really good and you want it to be a great mystery, you need to be really careful how you implement it, and you need to know how players will solve it. You can't just throw it in and then go, let's see if they can figure it out. Because what's probably going to happen, like your character's now dead, just to fill in some context as well, that tortoise was one of the other players in the campaign lost the tortoise in another realm, and now they can't get it back. So at this point we've not had it for probably 7 months of real-time live playing or something like that, if not a bit more. So there was a long period of time.
Yeah, I suppose when you factor in the fact that we've kind of...
Yeah, it was at least 3 or 4 months, and I would reckon probably 6 or 7, where we've not even heard from this thing either, So it is definitely a case where that's where maybe more frequent breadcrumbs or dreams would have been. Well, now there was a couple of dreams that my guy had that referenced it, I think, since then, but you're speaking about 2 over however many months it was.
Yeah.
So I would just caution against it and be wary of it. Don't make something so ambiguous that it just becomes boring to think about, because it happens. But yeah, so I think as well, one thing just on this note, this is more just a point rather than we've never, at least I've never experienced this. Well, I've seen it happen, but our guy doesn't do it. Yeah. And that's spoiling the plot for players. I've seen people talk about their campaigns. They go, Jordan, I'm happy talking to other GMs about their campaigns, even if I'm playing on it, because ultimately I want them to have fun as well, even if they are running. But I've had people, like, during game and during breaks, say, oh, well, this is what's happening. And they've spoiled story points. And I kind of go, but why? Like, I get maybe letting people have a peek behind the curtain. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would only really suggest doing that when they've actually, whether they've missed that part of the story and they're not going back to it, or they've solved it, you can then fill them in the rest of the stuff, assuming it doesn't spoil stuff later on. But just be careful, because if you just go in and ultimately spoil it, let's say somebody's taking too long at a puzzle and you just say, oh, well, this is the answer, just whatever, you might take away what that player feels like is progress. So I mean, there's nothing really to add to that unless you've got something specific. But otherwise, I think it's just more advice more than.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's dead obvious. Don't reveal the plot before the players have managed to explore it and work their way through it.
Especially if they're engaged with it, because otherwise it'll feel like you've snatched it from them.
Yeah, if you've got players that aren't engaged, and if you do that, then potentially you can get them re-engaged if they feel like they're wasting time, or that they're not getting or understanding something. If you kind of level with them in a couple of points, it might be enough to get them re-engaged. Probably unlikely, but potentially that's what can happen if they're in that sort of category. But if you've got somebody that's totally engaged, that's trying to figure out a puzzle, or they're trying to think for themselves about the kind of wider context of whatever situation they're in, they're going, right, okay, I know that somebody told me to meet them at midnight outside the cathedral, but they're somebody that's law abiding and wouldn't be sneaking out and wouldn't be this and wouldn't be that, so why are they telling me to do all these things that's completely against their character? And they're sitting trying to puzzle that out, and then you chime in with, oh, but it's because they're possessed. You've you've taken the surprise away, you've taken the mystery away, kind of the whole point of us talking just now. So you've done all that, but also the person has went from being engaged to, as soon as you give them it on a plate, you can totally kill it, like you're saying. But also there's, again, hopefully everybody's got good tables and everybody trusts each other and they all get along, and all the rest of it. But if you're as avert as giving somebody a plot detail as that, then you need to think about the kind of subtext of what you're saying, especially if it's in the context of a puzzle or whatever. Oh, by the way, because you're obviously not going to get this because you're too thick to puzzle it out, here's the answer. Again, might not be what you're thinking, it might not be what you mean. It might literally just be because the GM's there, everybody's going through the story, everybody's engaged, the GM's excited, and they accidentally blurt something out. Mm-hmm. It might not be a deliberate thing, it might not be a conscious thing, but you need to think as well about the kind of implications of some of the reveals and what they might actually mean. So again, I've not seen it actually physically happen in front of me. Everybody that I've played with has been professional enough or polished enough to kind of not tell you the answer before you've been given a chance at working it out. And as well, going back to the dream sequence, after my character died, I went, this is obviously something that directly relates to him, so I directly asked the DM about it. I went, alright, okay, right, what was going on there, blah blah, and I went, oh, I'm not telling you because it's, never get told directly it's still related to the campaign, but never get told that it didn't relate to the campaign. Which is why we're now in this position 2 years down the line where we're still waiting on an answer, which doesn't feel like it's going to appear.
We're not really seeking an answer, I think, now. Yeah. But I mean, that kind of what you're saying there, it links in with, like, you can do the opposite. Like, you can have people working up to about figuring it out, and then you spoil it. And things I've made spoilers, like, but when I had Baba Lysaga come into the game, and I went, oh, you mean Baba Lysaga? And they're like, I went, what? And they know the whole Baba Yaga thing, whereas the character in the game is Baba Lysaga. But it's basically the same basis. That's what it's based on. It's based on the European Baba Yaga. So they all know that sort of stuff. And they went, oh my god! I just went, anyway, I just kept going. Just like, I mean, I could sit and go, well, I screwed up. I mean, it doesn't really matter. They're going to play it anyway. I mean, they'd already suspected it anyway, and they were saying it, and I just kept like this. But.
And kind of ultimately with that's when you kind of go back to the toolkit beforehand, and you go, right, so their expectation now is that this is going to happen, so let's throw them a curveball.
Aye, and I did almost kill them, but all actually, so whoops. But you can do the opposite.
Is that throwing them a curveball or just revenge?
I was just throwing a massive rock, is what it was. It was the house through. Anyway, it was awesome. And nobody died. But so we spoke about build up and things. But the other thing you can do, this is just more a pointer. You know, sometimes it feels good, and sometimes as a GM you might think, you know, like, oh, this is great. It's all very clear. But just make sure you're leaving breadcrumbs for stuff that are clear. And if you're not sure, put in dream sequences. Use other things to help answer some of the mystery for the players. And the way to do that, if you don't do stuff like that and you assume people have figured out all your puzzles and they've plotted together all the red tape and they've sussed out what's happening in your mystery, you know, you can actually, if you don't give proper build up by thinking about that stuff on the route to actually giving someone a plot twist or a big narrative hook, no build up can totally screw up your mystery completely. And then you basically what effectively happens is you will basically spoil some of the questions they have because there's been no build up to get their brains ticking. So just bear that in mind is all. I think one of the things, I've seen a lot of this, and it's basically being, it's your phrase, so you can coin it. But the thing, I've been in a lot of games with this mystery, and the sort of the ambiguity is like very pretentious, and it's almost like the GM's been enjoying basically saying bugger all to you, you know. Jamie's got a good phrase for it though.
So being vaguely vague.
That's literally it. The thing is, I get it. You want people to start, you want to build and encourage mystery and not give answers all the time, because you shouldn't give answers all the time. The problem is if people are like going, I don't know. Now I was saying earlier about a game I was watching, I said what the hell's going on, and I was saying it out of enjoyment. But people might say, what the hell is going on? Don't have a clue what to do. And if you just sit and go, oh, well, we have to figure it out. It's just, you could have a great mystery there, but people are just going to completely turn their interest from it, which is kind of what's happened with this turtle thing.
I mean, the thing as well with like being vague, it's a really, really fine line, and I would say there's a difference between being vague and keeping it ambiguous. Ambiguous, to me, when something's ambiguous, to me at least feels like there is an outcome, but you're not sure whether it's A or B or A, B or C or whatever. But when it's vague, it just feels woolly, and it feels like there isn't an outcome, and that, you know, it's just it's getting made up as it goes along, but not in a good way where the DM's reacting to players and is kind of busking with what's going on, for want of a better term. And that's kind of the way that I would kind of differentiate between ambiguous and being vague. And because of that, being vague is always kind of a bad idea, I think. Again, ambiguous, bit different, because you've got your planned outcomes or you've got potential direction to take it. And kind of going back to build up, if something is vague, then it kills build up as well, because you've got the players that go, they feel lost. Whereas when it's ambiguous, they go, well, it might be this, this or this, but they've got a clear path of where it can go. Whereas when it's vague, they're confused. They're going, right, I don't know if this person is planning on robbing a bank. I don't know if they are, you know, if they're pretending that they're going to do that because there's some other outcome. I don't know if it is actually this group of people that are going to do that. I don't, you know, it involves a lot of I don't know rather than I think that. If it's ambiguous, to go, well, there's this and this, but I think this is what's going on. Whereas when it's vague, it's I don't know if they're doing this, I don't know if they're doing that, I don't know if they're doing that, I don't know what's going on. And I think that's the thing, if you're a DM, to sit and monitor what the conversation is. If you've got 3 or 4 people there and the biggest majority of what they're saying to each other is I don't know, it's too vague. They're not getting it. They're lost. If they're saying, yeah, I know that this is what you're thinking, but I think that this, it's probably more in the realm of it being ambiguous. And ultimately it'll kill build up, because if they don't have a starting point, they don't know the next point to go to. And as well, if you're being so vague that they're not clicking along and they're not following along, then it gets to the point when you do your big reveal, but the players are sitting scratching their head because they've missed all the clues beforehand, and they haven't realised there's been a build-up. There might be build-up there, but they've completely missed it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's going to happen sometimes. Especially, I've seen a lot of kind of cosmic horror games, people running the games. Cosmic horror is very abstract, and it can be difficult to nail down, and sometimes it's a bit of an acquired taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like art house films are an acquired taste. I won't go into the Blade Runner thing. I was about to use that as an example, but I'm not going to go there. But if you notice your player saying I don't know instead of I think that, then don't be afraid of throwing in a wee bow and throwing in a new mystery. Just divert their attention. Say, don't worry about that yet. What you're working on now, and then just do a wee dream sequence, put new breadcrumbs down, and that will solve it. But just be aware. Just don't indulge in just people being completely, like, frustratingly clueless, or clueless in a frustrated way is all I would say. And this takes us on to the last point, and that is, I'm torn with this one. It's monologues. Monologues in games, they can be good for expedition and things like that. The problem is they can go too far. Just like pretty much everything we spoke about, too much of it ruins the whole mystery. And monologues can be a way to not provide proper build-up. I've seen it used as a poor use. People have used that as a way for build-up, but it's just a poor use of it. I've seen it being used that ends up spoiling plots. Monologues, ending on a monologue can quite often not be quite a good ending, although sure it can if there's a real reveal that's in there. But I've also seen it just end up in vague philosophical arguments between one character, and that's all, like, between themselves. And quite oftentimes it's just used as a pure lore dump instead of implementing story building in your world and through characters and encounters. Quite often, if it happens in your games, it doesn't mean you're bad or anything like that. I just see that getting used almost like a plaster, and I won't go into examples because it'll take us over 2 hours for it. But it's something to just be wary of. Monologues is all I would say, or use them carefully and use them with real intent behind what you're doing. Because otherwise what happens is it becomes a lore dump, and really that takes away player agency, which we've spoke about at length before. But as soon as you take away that agency and you're effectively wanting to do your speech to the players, you've disengaged the players and you're now making them listen to you. And if you've not done the build up and the mystery and you've not got the puzzle pieces in place, then it's not going to be an engaging conversation, and ultimately just going to be boring for the players. I don't know, any thoughts on that other than what I've just said? I mean,
I'm echoing pretty much everything that you've said. The thing, and again, kind of like compare and contrast. A monologue, well, that is somebody doing a pre-rehearsed speech, basically. So whether it's the DM or whether it's one of the characters whether it's one of the players that's there that's, came up with something. But the long and the short is, a monologue is a pre-rehearsed speech, or it might not be pre-rehearsed, but it's a speech, which ultimately means that there isn't any engagement between other players and other characters, because they're going from the first sentence to the next one to the next one to the next one to the next one until they've finished. So for me personally, I'm not a fan of them, because it feels like I'm getting shut out. And again, that's not pointing fingers at different DMs and GMs and things, but just by their nature, you're going, right, this has started, there's probably going to be something important in it, so I just need to sit and listen for the next however long this is going to be. And although I want to engage and I want to be doing stuff, I can't, because I need to listen for the important bit of information, and it just doesn't suit me, and it doesn't gel with what I want to do in the games. Whereas if you've got like the DM that's got a group of people in, and they're coming away with whatever they're coming away with, and somebody heckles them or whatever, and then they're being reactive to that, then you go, right, okay, well that's totally different to me, because it's living and breathing, it's there, it's moving about, it's doing its own thing, whereas the monologue is just fixed and anchored, and it's just something that I just don't particularly like. And again, like you're saying, if that is the case, then it just becomes an excuse to lower dump and just go, well, this happened, this person has got delusions of grandeur, and they think that they're like a reincarnated god, so they're going through this big epic speech, and all you're doing is going,
when can I shoot?
That's exactly what's going through your head, right? When can I do this? When can I do that? The only time when it actually works in okay is if you're in Roll20 or something, you can kind of privately message somebody and go, right, I'm going to do this, and after I do that, see if you do this, alright, we can get them down in like 3 moves. Oh, that's a great idea. And you're getting some collaboration going on beforehand, and you're giving yourself an advantage, and you're using your time productively, shall we say. But I mean, that's the main things, that you're killing engagement with it. For me personally, it's something that just doesn't click with me at all, and again, it can be an excuse to lore dump, which for most players is going to put them off. And for the players that are interested in the lore, what you're doing is you're giving them it there and then, with no option but to sit and examine it, rather than if you went and if they bring whatever up in your game, this particular area, why is it that everybody walks about and all they wear is sandals? I don't know, sort of mad sandal wearing race of people, whatever, and they're turning up to you and they're asking about it in their time when they're ready for it. And if it's something that you've created that you're proud of or that you're invested in, chances are you're happy about talking about it at any time anyway. So when it comes to creating mystery, then again, monologues I don't think cut it 9 times out of 10, because you're directly telling the player something rather than an event happens which allows them to then explore and figure it out. Whereas if you cut off the time that they get to think, interact and puzzle stuff out, then you're killing the mystery dead, because you're just telling them what it is but in a roundabout way.
I mean, basically monologues can be, there is use for them, but they can be a way to they just add rigidity to your game. They make them rigid, and what I would actually always suggest is just be flexible, explore, try different things. If you screw up your mystery, you can always repair it, and then you know what to try better next time. But monologues, I've seen people just fall into this trap where every character uses a monologue, and it's like, oh god, here we go. I came up in that Star Wars game we done, and I just shot that woman because I was like, bam, bam, bam. It's just had enough, and it's like, oh, she was a Jedi, and then someone was healing her, and I went 2 minutes, bam, bam, finished her off.
Was a Jedi.
Yeah, was a Jedi. But anyway, that's us with mysteries. So you've heard our thoughts. We would love to hear what your thoughts are, whether you're a GM and you've heard some of our stuff and you say, I hate that, I think monologues are great, tell us why you think we're wrong, and you might change our minds. Maybe not Jamie's on monologues, and probably not mine either, but look, you might say something that's interesting, you might say something that maybe twists our mind a bit, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Players, have you heard anything that you've at least seen in your games and experienced it and either agree or disagree? We'd love to hear it. But I think other than that, thanks for listening and watching, and it's bye from me. Did you want to finish anything off?
Yeah, just again, although I'm pretty hard and set in my opinions on monologues, we're always more than happy to
Yeah.
listen to anybody's opinion, because if you stay closed-minded about something, then you might just miss something that's a total gem. So if you've got an opinion that differs from us, if you agree with us as well, then if you're on YouTube, there's comments underneath. There's also Facebook, Discord, there's Instagram, there's Twitter as well. So get in touch somewhere. And so bye from me.
And bye from me. See ya.
See ya.